Hey guys, it's Deacon Matt, and I want to talk to you today about this, the concept of a private Mass. Right now we're living in a time when so many of us are unable to attend public Masses, and public Masses are being, suppressed out of a concern for trying to mitigate the spread of the coronavirus. But we're being reassured that priests are still offering private masses, right? And we might not understand why that's a reassurance. Like, okay, well, good for the priests. They still get to go to Mass. It's one of the benefits of being a priest. You can always have Mass. But how does that benefit the rest of us? Well, we have to understand what a private Mass is. And really, there's no such thing as a private Mass, strictly speaking. A priest never celebrates Mass alone. Even when he's the only person, or seemingly the only person, in that church, in that chapel, he's never truly alone. And that's because of the nature of what the Mass is as liturgy. As liturgy, the Mass is an act of the entire church. And so in a very real way, spiritually speaking, the entire church is present at every single Mass that's celebrated. All the angels and the saints, even the church in heaven, not just the church here on earth, but the church in heaven, the angels and the saints are there participating in that worship. So even if the priest is the only person visibly there that you can see, he's never alone when he offers the Mass because of the nature of what liturgy is. More on that in just a second. Before we get there, I want to talk about the idea of the Mass as a sacrifice. A priest is one who offers sacrifice. That's what the word priest means. In every religion that has priests, a priest is one who offers sacrifice. But the Mass is not the personal sacrifice of the priest. What the Mass is the sacrifice of our one high priest, Jesus Christ. When we celebrate that Mass, it's a representation or a making present again of that universal sacrifice that Christ made for us on Calvary once and for all. Our priests, when they preside over that liturgy, they're acting in persona Christi, in the person of Christ, by virtue of their ordination, to represent that universal sacrifice to us. But it's not their personal sacrifice that they are offering. It's the sacrifice of Christ, and therefore it's the sacrifice of all of us who are united to Christ as members of his body. And that does not happen at ordination, that happens at baptism. And this is alluded to in the prayers of the Mass itself. So at the beginning of the Eucharistic prayer during Mass, listen to what the priest says. He invites us. He says, "Pray, brethren, that my sacrifice and yours, my sacrifice and yours, may be acceptable to God the Almighty Father." So he's saying right there in that invitation, this is not my sacrifice alone, it's my sacrifice and yours. And then how do we respond to that? We respond, "May the Lord accept the sacrifice at your hands, for the praise and glory of his name, for our good, and the good of all his holy church." For our good and the good of all his holy church. The spiritual graces, the benefits that come from celebrating the Mass aren't only for the good of those who happen to be physically there present. It's for the good of the entire church. And that's true of every Mass, even if the priest is the only person in that room. Okay? Liturgy. The Mass is liturgy. Liturgy is the work of the people. That's what that word means. It's an ancient Greek word. It means the work of the people. And what that means is that the Mass is never a private prayer. It's always a prayer being made with and for the people of God. That's why we have such a solemn obligation to attend Mass as members of Christ's body. We need to be there to participate corporately. Corporately, that word means bodily, as part of the body of the church, right? To give our worship to God liturgically. I mean, we should be offering God our private prayers as well every day, but But our relationship with God is not just a private, isolated thing. We're members of the body of Christ. And when we're not there to lend our worship to Mass out of negligence or carelessness or just a lack of respect or understanding for what's going on, when we're not there when we should be, that's a real wound to the body. There's a part of the body of Christ that should be there, giving due praise and worship to God, that's missing. And it hurts us. It hurts the body. Now, that's not true when we are prevented from being at Mass, being physically present at Mass, because of situations that are outside of our control, because of illness, because of persecution, because of dangerous travel conditions, or maybe just physically there's nowhere near us where Mass is being celebrated that we can attend to. Think about scientists who go to Antarctica for 6 months at a time, to do scientific research, or astronauts traveling, to the moon. They can't get to Mass. When we're unable to be at Mass through no fault of our own, but yet we desire to be there, we're able to still participate in that worship of the universal church, of the body of Christ, by uniting ourselves spiritually to that sacrifice that's going on there at the Mass, by giving that same attention, that same prayer, that same service at the altar, in our own homes or wherever we happen to be, as if we were there at the altar. And this is why it's such a beautiful thing that we're seeing in recent days, where parishes all across the country are figuring out ways to broadcast their Masses, to live stream on Facebook or YouTube or Vimeo or other social media, so that even if the priest is there by himself celebrating Mass, or maybe with just one or two other ministers and servers there with him, that the faithful all over the world are able to watch and in real time give their prayer and their worship and unite themselves spiritually to that universal worship of the church, to that one sacrifice of Christ on Calvary. It's a beautiful thing. And so we should be there in person. It's better if we're there in person. We all want to be there in person. But don't think that because we're prohibited from doing that right now because of present circumstances, that we're not receiving real grace, real powerful grace from the spiritual worship that we're able to give through those quote-unquote private Masses that the priest is offering, which really aren't so private after all. Okay, I hope that helps explain the situation a little bit and encourage you to participate in some of these live stream Masses, and even if you're not able to watch them on in real time, to be able to just take some time on Sundays or any day during the week. Masses are offered every day, and unite yourself spiritually with that prayer and that praise and that sacrifice that the priest is offering on our behalf, for our good, right? And for the good of the entire church. Praise be Jesus Christ.